Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, January 8th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. In 2008, California voters approved funding to help kickstart the California high-speed rail project. Now, more than 15 years later, and after billions of dollars spent, the project still has a long way to go till completion.
Mostly you have fiscal conservatives, whether they're Republican or Democrat, who are concerned about the escalation of costs that have happened.
Coming up, we'll hear an update on where the high-speed rail project currently stands. But first, today's headlines. The LA Times is reporting that bird flu testing in Central California wastewater is lagging behind the rest of the state. KVPR's Carrie Klein reports why health experts need such testing to help contain the virus.
According to the Times, only a fraction of the state's wastewater sampling sites for bird flu are in the valley, and 0 of those sites are in Tulare and Kings counties, where most of the state's human cases have been reported. Wastewater sampling became common during the pandemic as a way of tracking COVID. The practice is also used by health departments to evaluate public health trends. Health experts say it's unclear whether positive bird flu tests reflect active infections or inactivated virus in pasteurized milk. Still, many warned the Times that the public health response to bird flu has been too slow. California has reported 37 cases of the virus. All here have been mild, but the country's first bird flu death was reported this week in Louisiana. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
Californians generally pay almost double what most other Americans pay for electricity. That's according to a new report from the California Legislative Analyst's Office. One reason for that is the state's ambitious climate goals. LAO policy analyst Helen Kirstein says the state has had success in reaching some of those goals through higher rates, but they can also hold California back from making a bigger impact.
I think historically there was some feeling that, electricity rates being high, that encourages conservation, so that's good, and that's true. But on the flip side, it likely discouraged people from moving to electrification, from buying that electric vehicle, switching to that electric heat pump.
The report says high rates also put a strain on customers who live in hotter climates or earn lower incomes, though there are programs to defray costs. A top federal prosecutor in the Fresno area is resigning. U.S. Attorney Philip A. Talbert has overseen many prominent cases in the Eastern District of California. He served at the main courthouse in downtown Fresno. Talbert brought fraud charges against the co-founders of Bitwise Industries and former Congressman T.J. Cox. He also prosecuted violent crimes committed by MS-13 gang members. President Biden appointed Talbert to the post in 2022. His resignation is effective next week. The city of Clovis is inviting residents to help create a new map for district elections, starting with a map drawing workshop this Thursday night. The city recently voted to transition to district elections starting in November 2026. This after 100 years of at-large city council elections. The change comes after a civil rights group threatened the city with a lawsuit. The group argued at-large elections disenfranchise minority groups. Residents have until February 21st to submit their maps for consideration.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the members of KVPR. Join at $8 or more per month and access ad-free NPR podcasts through NPR Plus. Give now at kvpr.org/donate.
And now to our main story. This week, Governor Gavin Newsom visited the Central Valley for a big announcement. The state's long-anticipated high-speed rail project had reached a milestone.
We are here to lay some track to make real and visible all of the hard work over the course of the last decade and a half is a big damn deal. To the cynics that are filled with cynicism, that stand on the sidelines and don't engage, we're here making this work.
That's Newsom speaking at a construction site for the rail just outside Shafter, where a railhead is being built. A railhead is the first step in laying track for a rail, and this step comes exactly 10 years after construction first began on the rail in 2015. Newsom's also referring there to critics of the project. It's been the subject of attacks by Republican officials, including President-elect Donald Trump and his ally Elon Musk. Since construction began, the project has been met with ballooning costs and delays. Tim Sheehan's a reporter with the Fresno Bee who's covered these developments. He recently joined me to talk about the project's future. Sheehan starts by explaining exactly where the project stands right now.
It stands about where it's been for the last few years. There's construction going on in the valley on various overpasses, underpasses, trenches, things like that. There's been no track laid because that'll be a separate contract down the road. But there's stuff going on, but it's not the type of thing that people would really see as, that critics would see as progress.
Okay. Is it too early to ask when the train might be operating?
The state's goal, the California High-Speed Rail Authority, has a goal of having the trains operating sometime between 2030 and 2033. Whether they will make that or not is an entirely other question.
And that's got to be an updated goal because the original goal was much earlier, right?
Originally, when the state passed, or when the state's voters passed the bond issue Proposition 1A back in 2008, the expectation was, some of the optimistic expectations were maybe as early as 2020. Obviously, that's come and gone.
Yeah. So this high-speed rail project has recently been in the headlines again.
Sure.
That was after Elon Musk was critical of the project in his posts on the platform X.
Mm-hmm.
President-elect Donald Trump has tasked Musk to co-lead the new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, to help cut what they see as wasteful government spending. I think it's important to note first that DOGE is not a real government department. It really only has the power to make recommendations.
Right.
His recommendations could be powerful, though.
Sure.
So, Tim, tell us what exactly Musk said and what it could mean for the high-speed rail project in the future.
Essentially, you've kind of hit it. He has described it as a waste of money, a dysfunctional organization, things of that nature. It's been pretty broad, and that's not new. Back when, before he became a Trump appointee or aficionado, he has been critical of high-speed rail in the past, especially when he proposed his Hyperloop proposal, which was, I want to say that's probably been about 8 years or so ago.
What was the Hyperloop?
The Hyperloop was a proposal or an idea that Musk had to provide an alternative to high-speed rail that would essentially create a system. If you think to the old bank outside tellers, and you had a tube where you put your money or your checks in a canister and it would suck it up into the bank. That's essentially what Hyperloop was going to be, sort of a system of vacuum tubes and canisters in which people would ride at very high speeds. And he proposed the idea. There was a test track that was built, and the idea really never panned out. And later on, I believe one of his biographers indicated that he acknowledged that he proposed it pretty much to derail high-speed rail.
Okay, well, getting back to the current high-speed rail project, let's talk cost really quick. What was the projected cost when taxpayers approved this project, and where does it stand now?
Way back then, when Proposition 1A was passed, the price tag was, I believe, somewhere in the range of $30 to $35 million.
Billion, actually.
Billion, excuse me. Yes, thank you.
And now I believe we're talking triple that amount?
Roughly, yeah. Somewhere around 100, 120 for an entire system from LA to San Francisco. At this point, the actual cost is going to be unknown because the state has no plans to embark on anywhere from Bakersfield to LA or Merced to San Francisco until they know they've got the money in hand, and they do not have the money in hand.
Okay. I know the money has been a big reason that people have been critical of the project.
Very much so.
Yeah. Who are some of the critics you've heard from, or what's the general sentiment?
Oh, gosh. Early on, a lot of the criticism was coming out of Kings County and Tulare County. And most of the criticism at that point involved the routing and chewing up big chunks of farmland. Ancillary to that was the cost. Now, mostly you have fiscal conservatives whether they're Republican or Democrat, who are concerned about the escalation of costs that have happened over the last 15 years.
Yeah. This portion in the valley, give us a quick recap on where things stand. You mentioned laying actual track would be a separate project. So what do we have now? People might see these potential stations as they drive by the 99, but it's hard to kind of tell as just an onlooker what's happening.
Exactly. What we see right now are overpasses. Like at the south end of Fresno, there's a big double arch overpass over Freeway 99. At the north end of Fresno, you've got the double arch bridge over the San Joaquin River. In Madera County, you've got new overpasses that will take roads over the future high-speed rail tracks. Here in the city of Fresno, we've got projects in downtown and throughout the city where you have new overpasses being built that will carry street traffic over the high-speed rail tracks as well as the existing Union Pacific rail tracks. So we've got a lot of the hard infrastructure type stuff that's being built. Mm-hmm. Stations are still being designed for Merced, Bakersfield, Hanford, Fresno. And so once the rail path is cleared, then they'll be ready to award a contract for track and systems. And I believe that is expected to happen sometime this year for the contract to be awarded. Then, of course, the construction needs to happen.
Yeah. Big project.
Mm-hmm. Huge.
We've talked about some of the critics of this project. What are supporters of the high-speed rail saying? What's their pitch as to why this project should continue? Over budget, overdue, and they still want it. Why?
Yeah. The big pitch is, can we really stop now? You know, we've put all this money in. We've got this infrastructure, these overpasses, these structures that have been built. If we cut off the funding, what do we do with those? There's also still the expectation that it would provide long-term benefits in terms of traffic impacts, air quality impacts, reducing automobile traffic, things like that. Take cars off the road. I think that's probably kind of a tough sell for car-crazy California, but the hope is there that if people see the ability to get somewhere much quicker than you can in your car, that might work. And it might also help sell it for future sections of the state, like Bakersfield to Los Angeles, like the San Joaquin Valley to Silicon Valley in San Francisco.
That was my conversation with Tim Sheehan. He's a reporter with the Fresno Bee and has been covering California's high-speed rail project since 2010. And that does it for today. If you like what you've been hearing on the show, help support us. Leave a 5-star rating in your podcast app or share the podcast with a friend. We really appreciate it. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
We could all use a little help navigating the news these days. The Consider This podcast wants to give you a hand. 6 days a week, we'll help you make sense of the day's biggest news story and what it means for you in less than 15 minutes. Listen now to the Consider This podcast from NPR.